do have sound. There we go.
Welcome back to Composer Talk, everyone. We're on our 6th week, and
You need to come this way.
volume. Oh, yeah.
Align thyself.
We good now?
Yep.
All right. Still kicking. So to begin with this week, we have some important news items in the composition world.
Well, first of all, where were you last week?
Oh,
I had to
yeah.
grab a stranger off the streets.
Zach had to find a homeless guy to take my place last week. No, but for
The things I do.
for real, thanks, Angel, if you're listening, for filling in for me last week. It being Thanksgiving weekend, I was back in St. Louis chilling with the fam.
Slacker.
So
Nothing but a slacker.
Angel filled in admirably. So props to him.
I had to give him cue cards. No, Angel was great. Angel was great. I might have him back at some point whenever you disappear again, because that was actually fun. What I might start doing, just let us know what you think, but possibly even just occasionally bring in someone additional, just like
when
they have some
three-man, like a guest. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Person, yeah.
I mean, obviously, like when you disappear to St. Louis, I'm gonna
Mhm.
grab someone. But even outside of that, someone has something interesting to say.
Right.
Because occasionally Chelsea says interesting things, or like I don't know, Josh might say something interesting, or Angel did. Obviously,
we just need to get the big shots, man. Like
pluck.
we're gonna send John Adams an email. Hey, do you want to be on Composer? John Adams, if you're listening, we'd love to have you.
Where were you looking? You were like looking.
I'm
up
looking at the
my
camera.
board.
Am I not looking at the?
You have to look at the base of the camera, otherwise it looks like to me it looked like you were looking at my weird little. Looked like you were looking at cello construction up there.
But,
I have a weird board of projects.
But anyway, yes, thanks, Angel, if you're listening, and I'm back now and will be for a while. So
in theory,
hopefully, life is fickle. You never know what could befall you, but I don't have any plans to die or to disappear anytime soon. So
you'll
anyway,
disappear in a few weeks.
Yeah, but I should be able to do it long. We'll see. We'll have to talk about it.
We'll figure that out later.
The future of Composer Talk is well, it's well founded. Don't worry. Anyway,
I'll be here.
Big news items this week. One of the most prestigious awards in composition, the one with a name I can't pronounce, Grawemeyer. Is that how you pronounce it?
I think it's Grawemeyer.
Grawemeyer.
It's up there.
Yes.
I wouldn't consider it the most prestigious.
Well, I didn't say it's one of the. I mean, you have the Pulitzer, obviously.
Yeah.
And things like that.
Even in composition, I feel like they're
right.
I don't know. That's my personal take, but
regardless, we'll just say prestigious.
Yes.
We won't try to rank
award.
its prestige, but it is a prestigious award. Winner.
We have like a rank, Pulitzer's worth like 8 points. This is worth like 5 points.
It should be
we'll get a point system.
Every time an award's given, we're gonna rank it up.
We're gonna have like a little score. In fact, I'll put it like right there where you see I forget your name in ODST, but yeah, I'll put it on the ODST poster. There'll be like a little rank,
right.
And it'll be like, John Adams pulled ahead by like 3 points, but here comes John Williams.
Is anything ahead of the Pulitzer? I mean, the Pulitzer
Honestly,
is just an American award, so
I actually feel like probably this huge sidebar, but I don't care because it's kind of interesting to me. But I feel like honestly one of the best awards that a composer can get would be to either get a Medal of Arts from the president.
True.
Of the United States, in particular, since the United States really is kind of more the focus of contemporary music these days,
right.
At least academically speaking. And then I'd say the other big one is Film Score of the Year at the Film Awards. I mean, honestly, I feel like those two are probably the two tops, and it's mainly because the exposure.
Right. And I don't know that I'd say the Film Score of the Year is more prestigious than the poll. I kind of think them as different, just kind of different.
Well, I
areas.
do, but I'm talking
kind of,
just
right,
to the public type thing.
Because it was what's his name, Morrissey, Morricone. Morricone, I think was the guy that won it last year for the Hateful Eight.
Right.
But
by the way, interesting ones to keep track of. Keeping track of the top charts for video game compositions.
Right.
For the year. Those are some really good ones. I totally recommend checking those out if you haven't already.
But oh yeah,
Yeah.
the news. They Ward has been announced for this year. A composer named Brent Sorensen, a Danish composer who I am not particularly familiar with, but we'll have to check him out. He won it for a triple concerto called "The Island in the City." It's for violin, cello, and piano and orchestra, and was premiered in 2016 in Copenhagen.
Nice.
That's
from Rio. I actually I saw their thing on Composer's site not long ago.
Mhm.
I think they just had their 2017 rendition.
Oh, they're
happen.
a competition or call for
Yeah,
service.
yeah.
Mhm.
That might be what this. I don't know, but yeah,
Mhm.
that does ring a bell. It was probably Composer's site, but yeah, that's really cool.
Do you
I'll
know
listen.
this guy?
I don't really. I mean, this this sounds elitist, but I mean honestly, I tend to pay more attention to my field, and right now my field is American symphonic and American experimental music, and also kind of electronic. So I mean, it doesn't really fit into any of those really.
Mhm.
It's Danish small chamber music.
Well, no, it's a concerto.
Yeah.
It's yes.
Yeah, it's chamber, violin, cello, and piano.
No, it's for the Danish Ensemble Trio Combina and the Danish National Symphony Orchestra. So it's an orchestra.
Okay.
It's, no,
I just saw that.
no,
Wow.
it's an orchestral piece.
I
It's a
literally just omitted the word concerto.
a
That word.
concerto grosso, if you will, as they would have called it in the old days.
Back in the days of yore. So yeah, here's the article that we
Mhm.
were mentioning. It's yeah, that's actually. I feel like I've seen him before.
He looks very familiar. He has a very Scandinavian look. It's rugged.
Yeah, maybe.
Yes.
Maybe that's. All the Scandinavian. No, just kidding. But
We're
no,
gonna get
that's
so much hate mail this week.
Oh, so much hate. Yeah, it's just gonna be nothing but hate mail. It's not gonna be like, what you got against the Danish? Your cookies? No. Actually, yeah, the cookies are bad.
And I say Bent Sorensen. I'm not sure if that's the correct pronunciation. There's a non English character in the name, but
Let's see if there's a pronunciation on the Wikipedia.
on Wikipedia. Yes.
Wikipedia is great for their pronunciations.
Sometimes. It doesn't look like they have.
I don't know.
They often lack the pronunciation things for living people. I've found.
Sorensen. I mean, Danish. So I think that would be like Sorensen or something. Like I feel like
it's
the O is
probably-
elongated.
It probably has it's something like that.
It's something like that. But yeah, that's
Mhm.
cool, and $100,000 for the award. I mean, what would you do? Like, we could
Buy a
build
lot of Coke. Coca-Cola. I keep saying it's probably.
I told you the rules of
apparent
live streaming.
To most of the audience, when I say Coke, but for future reference, for any listeners, when I say Coke, typically mean the drink, the glorious nectar of the gods known as Coca-Cola.
Did you see that?
For future.
Did you see what I tagged you in?
Yes,
Yeah,
I did.
okay.
Yes.
Sorry, one of our composer friends here. He just made his background antique.
It's
Coca-Cola
like an
bottles.
Andy Warhol painting or something.
I figured you might.
Mhm.
Is that your desktop background now?
No, it's still the puppy. I have my desktop background is a puppy and a little bunny, because it's cute.
I've got more exciting backgrounds, man. You should be like me.
Anyway, moving on to other awards from this week. The Grammy nominations just came out for 2018, and so some of our audience may know the Grammys as the awards show where they give the best album of the year award to all the worst albums of the year.
Sometimes.
But when it comes to classical music, Grammys are actually pretty legit. And this year the nominees are Jennifer Higdon for her viola concerto. What's the Richard Danielpour. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but he's a prominent composer for his Songs of Solitude. Tigran Mansourian for his Requiem. Zhu Tian, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He wrote a concerto for orchestra, and then Adam Schoenberg, not to be confused with the more famous Schoenberg, who wrote and I don't remember the name of his composition, but yeah, that's not the right.
I mean, I found instrumental composition. That's what I was looking
We're
for.
that's still popular music. We're you want to go down way down at the bottom. Here, contemporary classical. Adam Schoenberg, a piece for orchestra called Picture Studies, as I've just discovered by pulling it up on the internet. So, definitely, I mean, I'm not familiar with all of these composers. I know Higdon. I know Daniel Poor. I actually just went and listened to that piece by Zhu Tian. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's an Asian name, I believe. But the Concerto for Orchestra, and it was quite good. From what I understand, there's seems to be a clear bias towards kind of the tonal tradition, or broadly speaking tonal, as in triadic and pitch centric. But still, some very good composers awarded here. Jennifer Higdon in particular is somebody whose music I've very much enjoyed.
I love Jennifer Higdon's music, especially Cityscape. If you haven't checked out Cityscape by Jennifer Higdon, especially Peachtree Street, wonderful. First of all, rock and timpani solo. That's not something you can say about many pieces.
Right.
But really cool piece. Zhao Tian, I feel like we talked about him a few weeks ago.
He
came up with some other award.
Maybe he won one of the,
I think he won something else. He's winning things. This is good.
and yeah, I listened to that piece last night. Very good piece. His Concerto for Orchestra. It doesn't really sound like to me, it came across more as almost like a symphony than a concerto for orchestra. But
there's defining points actually.
There are, but
it actually turns out, at least by a lot of smart people standards, there's actually a lot of symphonies that have been misidentified potentially as symphonies when in fact they're actually concertos for orchestra, which is an interesting thing. So it just shows that it's a big gray sliding line.
I don't really pay too much attention to genre boundaries, which who cares what he calls the piece? I don't know if this is just my perception, or this is kind of how other people in the world think. Whenever anybody says concerto for orchestra, the first thing that always pops into my mind is the Bartók.
Not for me.
I don't know if that's my thing, or if it's because I know there are many pieces.
I think that's a you thing.
Maybe it is a me thing.
Because I like that piece just fine, Bartók Concerto for Orchestra. But for me, when I think Concerto for Orchestra, I think of the Concerto Grossi by Arcangelo Corelli, as ancient as that is. The Corelli Concerto Grossi for Orchestra. Just think Christmas string music. Right. That's pretty much.
I don't know if I know that, but I know Corelli.
Yeah.
That might just be a me thing, and I've always kind of thought, well, everybody calls all these pieces concerto for orchestra, but you always think of the Bartók, but maybe that just might be.
Bartók isn't the only composer.
We'll have to. we might have to do a little poll of our colleagues to say, because I'm curious.
Just saying, I have the power.
Right.
All right. So, congratulations to all those people for being nominated. There's a lot of good stuff on there too. You just go. Actually, LA Times is the whole thing. Just go to LA Times. It's one of the headlines.
And some of the other things that I think two Berg operas were nominated for the best opera recording. Lots of for the what's it called? Best orchestral performance. Several works, CDs with contemporary works on them.
Honestly, those Grammys in general I'm not excited about, but those I'm not as excited about even compared to the rest. Because, really, it's just kind of like the right recording that the right person listened to at the right time.
Yeah, well, in general, I'm more interested in the composition stuff. But it is good. Still that contemporary. Higdon is on there again. That contemporary composers actually being recognized in the Grammys. Haven't followed the Grammys closely really ever, so I'm not sure if this is newer or if this has been going on for a while. But
that's yeah, there is lots of good stuff. Yeah, go check it out. It's on the LA Times. We'll get a link going on a bit later. But yeah, so that's congratulations to all of you.
Anyway, moving on to software.
Yeah, software. Yes. Couple kind of big tidbits. Anybody that is on the Sibelius platform, I'm sorry, but if you work in Pro Tools, they're having a big sale on all of their stuff. I think you can bundle most of them together, and actually, if you get the annual package for Pro Tools, you can currently get all of their add-ons for free for a year. So that's pretty cool. At least I think it's cool because I like doing the electronic stuff. I mean, unfortunately, I can't use it for what I'm working on now, but it's a really, really cool thing. So yeah, if you're doing that, check that out. Also, the Sibelius 872 update is now live, so go check that out. It has some bug fixes. No real new content for you guys, unfortunately, but it's got a few bug fixes.
Not getting any new content ever.
I'm just rubbing it in. I'm just like, I've cut you open, put some salt in it, I'm just rubbing it with lemon juice.
If they fix the pasting triplets across bar lines thing, I'll be excited.
No, that would require an overhaul of the
But
back
they're not
end.
going to do that, so yes.
I listened to someone talk about why that wouldn't work, because I haven't actually pried open Sibelius in a very long time. They would actually have to rework the entire structure of how they add notes to the page.
You would.
It's not going to happen.
You would have thought that at some point one of the developers would have looked at a Bartok score and realized that it.
Again, but keep in mind, at first it was actually just a limitation of programming in general.
Well, right.
But now it's kind of something with software. You can have the best piece of software in the world. And you can update it, but at some point it becomes outdated.
And all software is going to have problems. I mean, we're always improving.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, like, honestly, famous example, a sidebar on this, I play World of Warcraft a lot. That game, it is the oldest, not the oldest, but it's one of the oldest online games. It's 14 years old, just about.
Right.
So there's obvious issues with it. Like, the other day, for instance, I just found myself phasing through a floor. I was just walking around through the floor in a main area, and it's just like, well, I know it's not my computer, and so I'm just sitting there like laughing. And it's just a funny quirk of old software, and I think of that very much as a Sibelius thing of this is now a symptom of old software.
And in 20 years, people are going to be complaining about. People are going to be talking about how our software is so bad and how the new software is.
Well, no, Dorico is going to be forever. So
we'll see.
It will. Honestly, the only integration they haven't done yet is touch integration, and I think that's coming.
Right.
So, anyway, speaking of Dorico, no direct Dorico news, but there is some Steinberg news. Anybody that uses the Cubase platform, they just announced that they're now doing a trial of Cubase, which I think is really, really important because Pro Tools forever has always had some sort of free or trial version, and Cubase has always been like, you can use me, but you can't save on me until you buy me. But now you can fully use it, no holds barred for 30 days, which that's a really good thing for anybody working in, DAWs and all that. So go ahead and check that out if you want to look at some other software, or just if you want to see if you want the new Cubase. It's really good. You should dabble in it over break. Actually, not with your current computer. That thing wouldn't handle it. But yeah, also same for Cubase Elements. So both of those, check out the trial download. And also keep in mind, they'll only keep doing this kind of stuff if you actually participate in the trial. They're not just going to keep putting up trials if only 5 people go for it. So be sure, if you're interested at all, take advantage of this, because I don't know how long it's going to last for. So yeah. Also, speaking of just software and all that, all of the software had... I didn't even know this was happening because I was really kind of spaced out last week, and I wasn't as plugged in as I normally am, but all the software from Avid, whether it's Sibelius, Pro Tools, all that stuff, all the Steinberg stuff, all the Make Music stuff, Finale, all versions, almost every piece of music software was on sale for Black Friday. Some of it was like 50% off. So I kind of missed the boat on a couple pieces of software that I wanted. But yeah, so that's
Black Friday is a monument to consumerism anyway. So not participating is probably not something you should regret.
I had to participate this year. I hated it. My wife made me participate. It was awful. I mean, she made me get shoes.
Did you buy a piece of the border wall?
What?
Cards? Did you not hear about this? Cards Against Humanity. Cards.
Oh, I heard about that.
For those who don't know, watching, they're known for doing these ridiculous things on Black Friday, and they actually bought a piece of U.S. land on the border of the United States and Mexico, the idea of which is to block the completion of Donald Trump's wall. And we're selling.
Isn't it like 5 acres or something like that of the border?
I
it's
don't
something
know. I
silly.
mean, it's silly. Like the Attorney General's office, if they try to go through with this, will rip them to shreds in court. But it's still funny.
Yeah.
It's so but yeah, no, I didn't buy any of the Cards Against Humanity stuff either. But I think it's amusing though, and them selling their silly things on Black Friday.
Yeah. So that's gonna be. I mean, kind of retrospective, but kind of wish I would have hit that. I hope some other people got to take advantage of that. I mean, I will be honest though. I always take advantage of online things on Black Friday, like my new mouse.
Well, there's Cyber Monday too, which you've also missed for online shopping.
Yeah, I heard Cyber Monday.
Yes, yeah. Well,
Yeah, I did lots of stuff. Everybody knows about Cyber Monday. Just go on Amazon. Everything's like at least 20% off. Anyway, so enough plugging things that already happened. But yeah, so if you took advantage of that, great. There's lots of cool new updates for most of the software out. Also, on the horizon, the fall update for Dorico is coming. Yeah, fall's running out. We've only got like 25 days left of it. But you know what? Sometime in the next 25 days, we're going to have the new Dorico update. And it's going to be great. It's got some cool features. I already talked about some of those last week. But anyway, so moving on. So last week, while Jacob was off in La La Land, Angel and I were discussing the kind of idea of I guess, rules about a performance. Like, you know, what you do, what you don't do, the rules of being an audience member.
What you wear,
Yeah, we were talking about that, and basically what we ended up coming to the conclusion of is the problem is we treat all concerts the same with composed music. Not all concerts are the same. Some pieces, such as Terry Riley's NC, they're not meant to be go sit down and listen to it for an hour. That would be stupid. But it's much more meant for like what we're going to be doing next semester, playing it in a public space that people can come, enjoy, and leave, and it's always changing, always morphing whenever you pass by it for, up to an hour at a time. So I think that is one type of concert. And then the other type of concert is, hi, I am showing my proficiency at something, or hey, this is like I'm playing a symphony, like something that actually requires you to see the beginning, middle, and end, a full story to play out. And that's a separate concert environment in which, yeah, you should probably sit down and buckle up, because you're in for a ride. A good ride, but you're in for a ride. And I think that seeing a few places kind of bleed the boundaries a little bit, like, for instance, the Oklahoma City Philharmonic nearby us, how they now allow you to have snacks and drinks inside the theater now. I love that. That is really, really cool.
I there with my Coca-Cola.
I had a Jack and Coke personally, but yeah, we both had Coca-Cola. There you go. But,
I never buy things at the orchestra because they're so expensive. But
it actually wasn't bad. It was $4 for a drink. It's kind of like going.
That's actually very reasonable.
Yeah, it's not about. I mean, yeah, it was a short, but I mean that's like the price of going to the library or something.
Yeah, or in
so.
A bar.
Yeah, so, I mean, honestly, I kind of like that. I mean, yeah, you don't want to do anything excessive. Like, if you see, it's kind of standard etiquette rules. Like, if you're sitting in Applebee's or something and someone starts getting to, like, past tipsy type thing, they're often escorted out the door for a good reason.
Yes, and you also, you don't want people sitting there and, unwrapping their hot dog and then getting chili cheese everywhere as they sit there.
Right. Well, and that's why, like, they're selective about the things they have. Like, you only have small drinks. You only have, and if you don't have small, they're always bottled. And the snacks are things such as, gummy bears where it's gummy. You can't really make much noise with a gummy.
You're not going to be sitting there crunched with your chips, yes.
Yeah, like, I don't think they even had chips. I think it was basically candy bars and... just like little soft candies. Like, I don't even think they had Skittles or any of that. Do you remember if they had any?
I don't, but you definitely don't want Skittles.
Yeah,
there's a particular, if any of our audience has watched How I Met Your Mother, you will know that there's a particular scene where Skittles make quite an impression at an art gallery opening.
More. Everybody talks about that show.
It's funny.
I've never. Anyways, well, anyway, so yeah, so that's kind of how we left things. We left things, and we came to the conclusion that yes, there are some instances where you do need a certain level of concert etiquette, and I think the level that the OKC Phil is reaching is the best one. Where yeah, there's etiquette, but we're bending some of the old stated rules. But at the same point, there are also concerts which should be and very much are more suited to more come and go as you please or as you need. And, you know, with that, I mean, to kind of stem forward from that into a new topic, Jacob, tell me how you would feel about, let's just say I tell you, hey, Jacob, there's no room on the formal Composing Tomorrow concert. Too bad for you. But I would love for you to play your guitar sonata kind of out front as part of a mini composers thing earlier in the afternoon in a more informal setting. Well, would you be offended by that?
Not unless I felt like it was being pushed off. I mean, like for if that,
you know me, I never do that kind of thing.
If that had been this year when it's like a new student and both concerts are full with people who are required to perform, you know, then yeah, I mean I don't see why I would have a problem with it. I think, you know, having listened to what you and Angel talked about last week, I think part of some of the issue is that composers need to be more open to having their works of whatever type performed in different settings. Like you're talking about I just wrote a piece for guitar, you know, and that piece for guitar can be played in a concert hall, but there is no reason it also couldn't be played in, let's say, I don't know, at a dinner or something where people are sitting just listening to music and talking and, you know, eating, or I mean, hell, in a rock venue, why not? You know, like there's, I think, and it's been something I've been thinking about. It's something my teacher said a while back. It kind of put this idea into our mind. I think composers kind of tend to take ourselves too seriously. We think that our music is the most important thing in the world, and that it must always be listened to with complete attention, with no distractions, and that you know, anyone who doesn't listens to it while talking or while doing something else is being disrespectful in some way. And I think that's kind of something.
It's relevant.
It is. But I honestly, I think that's kind of something that composers, if we want to get our music out there, we need to overcome. Like, why not? We you know, classical composers, we think ourselves, you know, high and mighty. We have to be separate from, you know, the lowly jazz and rock. Why not, you know, start a band and go play, you know, well like something like our
improv
band
start
ensemble.
a group.
Yeah, but I mean, but even that, I mean, we're making this distinction that do we really need to make the distinction? I mean,
actually, yes, because a band does. Basically, it's kind of something that me and Dr. Lamb have even butted heads slightly on. My current comp professor, and we both kind of disagree, but we can both see the other side. And basically, I feel that, first of all, band has a few too many definitions as is right now.
well,
Right now, it
yeah.
can mean, okay, it's a collection of guitars, keyboards, and drums, with or without vocals.
But that's not always what it.
No, I
yeah.
know it's not, but that is one definition. Another definition is winds, brass, and percussion. That if you say band, it can mean that. You can say band, and it means a marching band.
Right.
All that stuff. So, and it kind of helps that now we have things like, oh, we have a rock band, or we have a jazz band, or we have a wind band, like things like that, and that kind of helps. But we're starting to come up with it's kind of like folder hierarchy in a computer. I keep going back to software today, but it's kind of like folder hierarchy in a computer. There's a rule of organization in that once you have X amount of files, and I think it's something like 6 or 7 in one folder, you need another folder to separate that out so that it is more organized and so that you can more easily process the information. Same thing goes for folders within folders, and I think the same can be applied potentially to ensemble types. I mean, right there, what have I listed? 4 possible definitions for a band, and that's just scratching the surface. I mean, we could make a didgeridoo band, and that would be a band. I think it'd be strange, but it'd be a band.
But you're trying to use technical definitions to describe a term that in context isn't really technical. Band is used by most musicians in the popular music area to refer to any group that makes popular music, whether that's guitar, bass, and drums, or whether it's strings and trumpet.
Okay.
And
well,
when I talk about make the distinction between ensemble and band, I mean there in that context where you might say just ensemble to refer to any group of classical musicians and band to refer to any group of popular musicians, there's really I don't think there's really much of a difference. I mean, yes, it has certain connotations in the genre of music, but if we're talking about blurring those boundaries, which I think to a degree we should, then
okay.
yeah, see, a group of instrumentalists playing music, of a specialized type.
Right,
of
a special. Now, I think the specialized type, that is the part where I can get on board with that. Without the specialized type bit, then I would lose it. But because they're complete definitions, so just listen to me if you will.
Right.
A group of instrumentalists playing music. I don't know about that. A group of instrumentalists playing music of a specialized type. Now that automatically says you need the definer word. You can't just say, oh, it's a band. It is a rock band. It is a jazz band. It is a contemporary band. It's a country band. At that point, I know what you're talking about. But if you just say, oh, I have a band concert tonight, I don't know what to expect. I don't know whether to dress up in like a Led Zeppelin t-shirt. I don't know whether to put on a tux.
That's why we have this thing in English called context. I feel like you are being too weird, anal about semantics. Like you can go on about how we should use such and such word to mean such and such thing all you want, but in the end it doesn't affect how people actually use the English language. And
I'm just offering you that's just my perspective of how I see it, though. And this is someone who I am fairly, I mean, I'm very open. Like, I do, like, I'll put it this way, I know what you're talking about most of the time, but I'm trying to kind of play devil's advocate here.
But I mean, if you, here's the thing, if you have an ensemble, it's guitar, trumpet, piccolo, and bassoon, and you go into a rock venue and play music, people are going to call you a band, no matter what kind of music. The third band was some weird chamber pop thing, or so
I just like a little bit more definition, so I know what to expect. That's just me, but I suspect I'm not alone in that. I want to know whether to put on a tux or a Led Zeppelin t-shirt. Like that's me.
But like, I had a point in there somewhere.
Yes, you did. Sorry,
we were lost. But like, it was something to the effect of like, why not do something like that? Why? And there, of course, there are people who take their music into unconventional territory, whether that be the popular music world, or whether it be the street corner or the house concert. But I do think that a lot of composers, we get too obsessed with the concert hall and prestige, and and being thought of as the next great composer or whatever, so that we miss opportunities to bring our music to new audiences. And also just in the broader sense, I think there's a tendency for not just composers, but I mean artists in general, whether you be a writer or a painter, to just think of yourself and your work with this kind of self-importance that ultimately does you a disservice, because if you're coming at your craft with this self-importance, the most important thing. I'm making art and changing the world and all this. I honestly don't think you're going to be as good as if you come at it from a more, I guess we could say, playful perspective. There's a reason we call it, playing an instrument and not working an instrument, because I think there's an element of, we're composers. I mean, there's an element of ridiculousness to what we do. We take sounds and we put them together, and they sound pretty, and we hope people like it.
Kyle so my buddy
Right.
Dr. Vanderberg put that point together the most beautifully, I think. Composers are the most absurd of crafts. We make a series of dots and lines on pages, and then we expect people to sit there and listen as other people interpret these dots and lines into audible sound. But when you say it like that, we are the most ridiculous people.
It sounds really silly.
Doesn't it? That's exactly what we do.
But I think, and I don't think it's contradictory to be able to affirm the importance of the arts, and at the same time, realize how absurd it is. And really, if you think about it, life itself is absurd. I mean, we're walking, talking sacks of water, essentially, that ascribe great importance to ourselves and our lives, when in reality the cosmos is infinite, and we're just little bits in it. So I think that taking that approach, I mean, just as composers, being able to play, being able to recognize that what we do is important, but it's not the most important thing, and that there can be elements of silliness and ridiculousness to it, and to everything. Yeah. You have anything to add?
Something is buzzing.
Oh, it's my phone. Just going off. Somebody
you should
was trying
that.
to call me or something.
You should stop that. Well, I mean, honestly, yeah, I think that sometimes composers do, and I think that composers should be more open to having less serious things. Like, I've something I've been working on for a while is the logistics of how I could get, let's just say, 12 people into my house and have a string quartet of mine played just for funsies. I mean, I think it'd be cool. I mean, I've got a space for it. I kind of have half a string quartet right now. And honestly, I don't see any reason why not, because I kind of want to share my music, and yeah, sharing scores, sharing MIDI recordings, sharing pre-recording stuff, that's one thing, but just sharing a live performance and having a good time, I think that's completely different. And it's like a discussion I was having with Dr. Karathanassis yesterday. Having live performers whenever possible adds something to any environment you're in. So, like, for instance, and no, this isn't trying to be elitist or any of that, but if you're at a wedding and someone just has, like, a pre-recorded Pachelbel's Canon in D playing out of their little stereo that they're holding like this, okay. But if someone has a string quartet or a brass trio or a piano, something playing that instead, there's more emotion, there's more connection, it's a lot more personal, and it can be a bad performance, and it's still more personal. So I feel, at least to me, I would almost 9 times out of 10, I'd rather have the live performer. And in this context, it was for a piece I'm working on. I was just deciding, well, should I just pre-record this part and put it in? And the end decision was, no, it's just better to have it live because it adds to the performance.
Well, and at a wedding, it's like the old band versus DJ debate. Again, How I Met Your Mother fans, the major plot point.
Are you obsessed with that show now or something?
It's a good. There's come up opportunities to make a reference. Zach, you know me. It's funny.
Obviously.
Not terribly interesting musically, although there are a couple. It has its moments. But
well, but yeah. So I think composers potentially do. I think that, and I'm trying to break the barrier a little bit with what I'm trying to make the improv ensemble do next semester.
Right.
I'm trying to find us some unique venues. I want to play at the museum. I want to play at the other museum. I want to play potentially in a place here on Campus Corner. Probably, I wouldn't say one of the bars, but maybe someplace like Big Bear or something, just for 30
You
minutes
might
or
not
something.
find very much room in there.
Outside.
Outside.
Yeah,
But yeah,
outside of it.
and with the improv ensemble, I think it's particularly evident that when we, you know, that there's something playful and silly about composition. I mean, we did a piece this past year that scored for Plamps, and yes, it's legitimately, you know, there's artistic interest to it, but it's also like we're playing Plamps, like
Actually, on that, I actually have a question for you. So
mhm.
we had this discussion a couple times about that ensemble, and I kind of want to bring it up because it's definitely relevant to this taking too seriously approach. So that specific piece, Branches by John Cage, it's actually a really cool piece, and it does specify, yeah, you need some cactus and then amplified cactus, and you are supposed to consult the I Ching after that to determine how many additional players you need, what they're going to play, and further than that, you use it throughout the rehearsal process to structure what Branches is going to be to you. And the result is a really cool, it's a very intriguing thing. And something that is fairly common with a more complex piece like that is for ensembles to take a core concept, such as the amplified cactus and plants, and just say, you know what, we feel like this is it, we're good. And so we kind of ditch the instruction manual after a while. So my question to you is, like, let's just take your piece, for instance, Pater Noster. It was a really cool piece, basically Lord's Prayer in Latin for, it's in about 7 minutes-ish, somewhere in there.
Oh, some 6 or 7.
6 or 7, yeah, depending on the performance. I think the longest we have was 8. Anyways, it's somewhere between 6 and 7 minutes. So just imagine, if you will, that Pater Noster, someone gets a hold of the score, they're like, okay, I'm going to do this. And you hear them, and literally all they're doing is they're doing the Latin chant. And they basically just have players descending and ascending their scales, with just one person in the middle doing the free improv stuff. So I mean, that very much violates the piece, doesn't it?
For those out there who don't know the piece, I won't take the time to experiment it, but there's more to the instructions than he just described.
Basically, I just gave like the first third of it. Yeah.
I mean,
like, how would you feel?
Well, I would, you know, if I came across something like that, I would probably. I mean, I don't know. If I felt like my piece wasn't being performed in a way that showed it its best face, I don't know, I might email the ensemble director or something. No, I would want it to be performed the way I wrote it.
Right.
Of course, there's always it's an improvisational piece. There's plenty of room for interpretation. I think you get into with things like, you know, this John Cage piece we did. John Cage is dead, and once a composer is dead, I don't know. It's kind of an interesting ethical conundrum. I don't, you know, for example, I don't think if you were to go in and perform Beethoven's Fifth Symphony on guitars, and like write a rock band version, it's not what Beethoven intended. But you're taking a piece and you're putting your own kind of spin on it. When we did Branches with the ensemble this semester, we may not have not followed all the rules exactly. Does that mean we're going against Cage's the spirit and all that? I mean, not necessarily. I think you know there. And there's that weird ethical area where is the composer's dead, but is he dead enough to start doing weird things to his music without his permission?
I'll put it this way. I think the second you go against the instructions at all, I feel at that point, you're not performing the piece. You're performing a closely related piece. And, I mean, obviously, yeah, if you, like, hold it from odd too long, that's different. I'm talking about an actual structural change, such as leaving out the back half of the instructions for your piece or for Branches or something else. So, me personally, for instance, like, I'll just use cello construction because it's fresh on my mind. Actually, no, better yet, I'll use Nocturne for Dice because this will be a lot easier to synthesize. The piece, as it stands now, it basically just plays out like a tabletop game. You go around in circles, rolling and playing your pitches. What they're determined by the die that you're holding. I would feel very violated if I found out that people were just sitting there rolling, or not even rolling anything, and just playing random pitches. That completely violates, in my opinion, the point of the piece, which is to respond and basically, like, for instance, if me and Jacob end up with clashing tones, maybe we bring out those two clashing tones. Like, it totally eliminates that ability for reaction from the ensemble. And so to me, I feel the piece is destroyed if you do not play pitch class 11 whenever you roll 11, or pitch class 5 if you roll a 5.
Well, there's kind of a sliding scale. You know, in my piece, if you and the piece I wrote when we had this improv ensemble for you listeners, it was, the rules were rather complicated. I mean, relatively so. You could mess with a few of them.
I'm listening.
You could mess with a few of them, and it still recognizably be that piece. I mean,
like, for instance, determining the pitch ahead of time.
Right. I'm not going to go into too many specifics. It require me to read the score to you, but I think it depends on the piece. I mean, and with composed music as opposed to more improvisational music. I mean, it's kind of a different animal, but there's similarities. I mean, there's you can go so far or farther. I mean, I think most of us would agree that there's a difference between changing one of Beethoven's tempo markings and rewriting the notes.
Some would argue actually that changing a tempo marking does completely change the piece.
Well, it does, but playing something at 110 instead of 120 isn't the same as transposing two of the parts up a third.
I've got some articles I'll send you later that definitely state otherwise, but
I mean I do see your point, because the point that we tend to prioritize pitches so much and forget about these other elements of the music. I do think, and I see the argument. It probably depends on the piece, but we can get into that later. I mean, that's a whole...
Yeah. Well, I mean, let us know what you guys think. I mean, I feel that, yeah, we do in general take ourselves a bit too seriously. And I think definitely kind of stems from the whole, I guess, the edification of the concert hall. Like, oh, the concert hall is the utmost experience that you can ever have your music do. I mean, I think the concert hall is nice, but I'm perfectly happy having my music played in the foyer. No different. Just like, I mean, I can safely say that I did have music played at a Springfield Symphony concert. It was in the foyer. But
right.
Yeah, it was there. I mean, I felt perfectly happy. I mean, my stuff was being heard by the same people. I had probably the same amount of responses I would have had if I were in the hall.
It's like, you know, yeah.
I mean, there really was no difference, except my stuff was on one side of the doors and the main show was on the other side of the doors. So, I mean, I wish I would have thought that earlier. That would have really helped.
And in all, yes, it might not be the main attraction. It might not be the thing that people are sitting there listening to and giving all their attention to. But music can be both incidental and the main attraction. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I'll listen to classical music in my car, and I also listen to it when I sit down and listen to it again. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
So,
well,
yeah. Continuing, Zach, you want
to
take this? We have about 10 minutes left.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and actually this is the perfect amount of time to be able to talk about it. So so our librarian Matt Stock and I, we exchange things because we're both weird guys. But something he tossed my way was a podcast from basically, have you ever noticed that there is an abnormally high amount of people that have a jazz degree of some sort, or they play a lot of jazz and like they're a famous jazzer, and they're in a field like astrophysics or something. Like, there's an abnormal, and it's a weird thing. And it's not just in jazz. Just right now, it seems that I know more people in jazz that have that, but there is kind of a correlation, it seems, to where it's at least a trend. I don't know. I mean, it's by no means a requirement, but there are a certain amount of people that have this. And one of these folks ended up bringing up a point in this podcast they sent me. And the point was, Bach was not known as a composer in his time. Bach was an innovator. He was an inventor. He was known as the do-it guy. He was the guy that you went to get your stuff fixed, to get some advice on stuff, and he sat there and he developed ways to do things. And his sketchbooks, so to say, are what became these compositions that we now play all the time today. So I guess the question that I have for you, Jacob, is it more important to be a composer? Or is it possible for a composer to be remembered because they were an innovator?
I mean...
Not necessarily within music
there's different... I mean, Bach... he was an... Like, when we talk about Bach as an innovator outside of music, I mean... He was still related to music. I mean, he was an organ expert, I believe, was the...
Yes,
he
was an organ expert, and he...
Right.
I believe he... I don't think he ever built an organ, but he knew how to maintain them. He knew how to fix them up. He knew how to refine them.
He was hired... he would be hired and travel and go in Germany and go test organs to make sure they were set up correctly. Which, like, the guy... Yeah.
Could you imagine a louder job? Actually, take that back. Trash processing plant. Been there. That's louder.
Roadie at a metal gig. But I mean, I don't know. It's not a hard and fast rule. I mean, Bach.
Well, I'm not saying hard and fast, but I'm just saying, is it an alternative venue? Like, is it an alternative lane to quote achieve compositional greatness?
I don't know that I see the connect. I don't know that it's a lane to achieve compositional greatness. I mean, there's lots of people who do more than one thing in their life.
Right.
Like Leonardo da Vinci. I mean, painter, inventor, and I think that in our all our pursuits in life kind of do to a degree affect the other. I mean, I know you talk about being kind of inspired in your music by your gaming, by your electronic. You work with computers and programming. I tend to feel the same way about literature. That I love to read and I like to write, and that's a different thing from my composition. But it does affect what I write. I mean, it's even if only subconsciously. And of course, and I think that it's important not to get trapped in this idea that there's one thing that you have to do for your life, and that's your calling. So I don't know that I call it an alternative way to become a great composer, but
I'm not saying it's an alternative
right
way. Like, just think of the highway. Think of 44 for half the way up to Missouri. You've got two lanes that go the same direction. You can pick either one. They both take you there.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we all choose our own paths in life, and some of us, I mean, some of us do more polymath, work in multiple fields, and some of us tend to focus on one thing. I do think that as a composer, I think this is probably pretty universal. I think it's important to have something else, because I think you're ultimately going to, and it doesn't have to be a career related thing. It can be a hobby.
Right.
I think your creative work as a composer is going to suffer if you don't embrace I could say just embrace the world and all the good and beautiful things in it. Whether that's
Star Wars,
right? Whether that's movies or literature or computers, there's composers. I mean, yes, composition is one of the most abstract arts, but it's not purely abstract. It relates to. I have no idea what you're doing with the mouse.
I'm just showing I like technology.
Right,
this is one of the things that gets me going.
But it does relate to other things.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, if you read about Bach, I mean, he was a composer and an organ technician, and he was also I think he was a very theologically astute person. That was, I think, that was one of the areas I think, you know, that gave Bach inspiration was his faith.
Right.
And Bach, you know, with him, it's rather marvelous how much he managed to do, writing all that music and raising a huge family and doing all his technical and administrative and teaching duties also.
Right.
And not all of us are going to be as productive as Bach, but I think it is important to have multiple venues, whether composition is your hobby and something else is your career, or whether both are career things. You know, I think, yeah.
So now, the finale of that podcast that Matt sent me, it kind of talked about finding ways to kind of, I guess, cross-pollinate between your multiple areas. So, like,
yeah,
me, for instance, it makes really good sense that I was able to both pick up and why I still enjoy doing electronic music. Because I have composition and I have computers. Those are two of my great strengths. No one knows me and doesn't think that those are two strengths of mine. So, well, and gaming, but you know, that's a separate thing. But I just want to pair these two. So without being strong in both of those, I wouldn't have a couple of what I think are some of my better pieces.
Right.
Things like, you know, my laptop quartet. I still think my laptop quartet's one of my best things I've written, just because it's so weird but so cool. Yeah. And that was an example of me taking my multiple streams and putting it into one basket and saying, this is what I can do. And basically for that, for those that don't know, I created a piece of software for it to be played on called Excelsior, and hence why the thing's called Laptop for Excelsior. Laptop quartet, basically. And you're literally playing a piece I wrote on an instrument I designed from the ground up. So that, to me, is kind of I used both lanes to create something new. So the odds of someone else creating that quartet are hilariously small, or even one like it, because I did that. And I think that going back to Bach, I think it was very important that he was an organ technician, because think about it. Some of his best things are his preludes and fugues for organ. And he wouldn't have been able to do that had he not been a master of knowing, okay, on all pipe organs, this is true. However, if I write this note here, on half the pipe organs I've played, it ain't going to be a thing. So he would not write that. And that's why his preludes and fugues work on all organs. Whereas, you know, Joe Schmo or me or Jacob or you could write something for organ that sounds great in the Gothic hall organ, like, oh my gosh, you're so good. Someone does it on recital and sharp, and it's like, oh, what did I just listen to? And it really does come down to that, and it's just an interesting concept.
And with, you know, with Bach, also, as I mentioned earlier, you know, with his theological interest, that also affected his music a great deal. You know, you listen to his church music, his cantatas, and there's all sorts of musical intricacies that relate. I mean, as is common in Baroque era, relate to the words, as well as musical symbolism that relates to the kind of the higher concepts in the words. And of course, you could have a whole other debate about musical symbolism and whether it really adds to a piece. But I mean,
it depends on the composer.
Yes, and I think I think with Bach, it is relevant. It's part of his music. I mean, it's part of the art and the craft. So yeah, and of course there are plenty of other I mean, you think about all the literary composers who rose to prominence in the Romantic era, electronic composers like you've done that today, and I kind of have this going theory that kind of every composer has not necessarily just one element, but kind of one concept or area that tends to like inspire their work. And I think for someone like Berlioz, for example, I think, you know, Berlioz is a literary composer. He was inspired by language. It can be a musical element or a non-musical one. I think someone like John Adams, his element is harmony. that's kind of what his music is. All the elements of his music are very good, but harmony is kind of what drives it.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't think it's necessarily one thing for everyone, but I think kind of all composers. This is idea.
We've all got something that we
an
can
idea you
add.
run across in Copeland too. That you can kind of look at any composer and be like, well, there's this one element, musical or non-musical, that kind of drives a lot of what they do. I think that anytime you explore an area outside of music, it adds to what can drive what you do. So yeah.
And I totally agree with that. I mean, and I think, again, that's one thing. Like, I loved I loved the whole thing. I'll leave a link to it down there once we're all done. It's totally worth listening to. And in this case, just for context, it's basically about, hey, this is how I use my background in music, computer music specifically, and software engineering to create musical iPhone apps that you can make music with. I mean, heck, we've got a musical instrument in most of our pockets with our smartphones. Why not use it? And he found out, yeah, you can use it. We used him in improv ensemble last semester, actually.
We had an U5, a really great euphonium quartet that came to OU a couple months ago that did a piece on their phones as well.
We did it first. Yeah, so yeah, it's a really interesting concept. It's a really good podcast. I totally recommend listening to it. It'll definitely be good. And man, I can't believe, like, just so you guys know, we keep the way we have been structuring this is like we have kind of like discussion topics that we want to get to, but then like we have some of our more prioritized ones, things like, oh, this is more relevant, this works better with this one, or oh, that news topic really relates to this. And as a result, at the end of, I think it was 2 weeks ago, we had like 5 or 6 like banked topics that were
right.
We can't get to these. I'm really proud. It's down to like 2.5. We're getting better at talking. Anyways, well, this has been Composer Talk Week 6.
Yes.
6. Yeah, thank you very much for tuning in. This is Zach.
Jacob.
Yep.
Send us your hate mail. We appreciate it. And
no hate mail. You can send cookies though. I'll take cookies.
Hate mail with cookies. Law and gospel.
I'm going home. All right.
All right.
See ya.
Adios.